Hey y'all. So this is your first you know, TED Talk from Moretti from here in TV land. Let me put my glasses on so I can. All right. At this point, you guys have seen the episode that I asked the substitute to show you on the Battle of Manassas, right? Bull Run. And I mean, I want you to think about, just stop and think how wild it is that during that battle, there were actually like people that came out to watch it and waved handkerchiefs and brought like picnic baskets out and like sat and drank wine and watched it like they were tailgating at a football game or something. I mean, that's literally what happened at the Battle of Bull Run. Again, Battle of Manassas, Bull Run, they're the same thing. And don't let this confuse you, even though it probably will. On Civil War battlefields, the Southerners tended to call the battle by whatever town was closest. And in the case of the first major battle of the Civil War at Bull Run, the nearest town, if you will, was called Manassas Junction. So they called it Manassas. But meanwhile, Northerners tended to refer to battlefields based on some geographic feature of the field. And in the case of Manassas, Bull Run Creek goes right through there. And that's why it was called the First Battle of Bull Run, just for whatever, clarity's sake, right? But that's some wild stuff, right? Like you got senators and everything coming out there to watch this conflict and like you're tailgating at the Bears game or something, getting drunk, and then after the battle's over and the Union Army's trying to flee, right? You saw they're like getting entangled with the spectators and they getting in the way of what was supposed to be an orderly military retreat or withdrawal. And instead it was a rout. It was a rout. And it's really important that you guys realize that at, the Battle of Bull Run, what it does is it sets the reputation of the Southern general Stonewall Jackson, okay? Because Stonewall Jackson is going to be a legend in the South. I kind of hinted at this when we were watching at the movie, at the Ken Burns films right before last week, and Stonewall Jackson's a legend in the South. And his strategy effectively was to try to stay right on top of the enemy. So that way he could harass the North or the Union in a way that the Union's numbers couldn't take advantage of themselves, right? Like one of the advantages, and I'm going to get into this later in the module, is that the North has the manpower advantage, right? So Stonewall Jackson would just kind of get right up on the Union whenever he could, which was a dangerous thing to do, but would also like kind of negate some of the manpower advantages because that would make it hard for the Union Army to mass its troops. Okay. So you saw that at Bull Run, he got right on top of him after like holding that ground. Look at Jackson standing like a stone wall, right? And then like the counterattack drives the Union from the field. All the people are cheering and they're like, right. And then everybody starts to try to retreat. But it's too late. And one of the fateful decisions that are made is that Beauregard, the Confederate commander, calls off the attack. He does not pursue them all the way to Washington, D.C. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want to remind you guys of is that England is watching. Actually, the world is watching this. Like, what's going to happen to the United States? The United States at this point, when the Civil War actually begins and the shooting begins, we are still considered an experiment when it comes to countries around the world, right? I mean, the United States is what, 70 years old at this point? Like, that's not very old as a nation. And, everybody's like, see, we knew this American experiment was too good to be true, right? They're finna collapse. Like, we knew it and it's going to happen. And now they're fighting this civil war. And notably, England is watching. And so, they're kind of trying to see, do the Southerners enter the Capitol in Washington, D.C. and like take that and like cause chaos, right? That's a thing, they're watching. And Britain is always a threat to enter this war on the side of the South. In fact, the South is kind of banking on it, right? Which is something I can get to later as well. But let's kind of move on now to some of the other stuff I need to talk to you guys about. Let's my screen sharing here. There we go. All right. So obviously, the very video I'm giving you now is going to get posted right here for you guys to click on, what you've already done, or you wouldn't be watching me right now. So when this thing all begins, what are potential northern versus southern advantages? Okay. So let's kind of work our way through them. Leadership. At the beginning of this conflict, the best officers in the U.S. military that had come out of West Point, the best ones went south. Okay, they joined the Confederacy. Most notably was Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, but other people too, like James Longstreet. These were guys that, like, you guys haven't heard of it. You've never heard of these people before, most of you, but these guys were great military leaders. They were audacious, right? They would take risks. And to be honest with you, if the South's going to win this fight, that's what they need. They need guys that are going to be audacious. They're going to take risks. They need guys that are going to offset the types of advantages the North has. Okay. Meanwhile, the Union Army is a disaster. There's like nobody in line in the North that really knows what they're doing. Okay. And that's going to be a real problem. Abraham Lincoln's going to have a really hard time finding a general that is willing to do what it takes to win this war. And I will come back to that reality later in subsequent lessons. But just for now, understand leadership advantages with the South. All right. I think it should be pretty obvious to all of you that the technology advantage is with the North, right? That's where all the factories are. Okay. The Industrial Revolution has been going on in the North for a long time now. Any new technology that comes out, okay, and I'm going to go into this more in my video tomorrow, which, by the way, is a video that I took from home last year. So when you look at the backdrop and you're like, wait, this isn't ready in the classroom, that's why. Let me know if you think I look younger. But like, the Industrial Revolution produces weapons that are much better than what we had before. And I'm not going to say much about that right now because it's all in the video tomorrow. But other technology too, right? Like the railroad, okay, the telegraph. The North, which is the industrialized power, they're the ones that have that stuff more. It's not like the South doesn't have any railroads, right? Or telegraph lines or anything, but the North has more of, okay? And so that's going to help them out in terms of things like troop movements and, sending things by telegraph is a heck of a lot faster than having it delivered by a pony, right? By like having a guy get on a horse and have to drive, ride over, tell you where the other guy's troops are. So that's definitely gonna be the advantage of the North. Food supply. Once again, advantage North, right? Because what did they grow in the South? I can hear you all saying it. Cotton, right? Cotton and tobacco, which makes you a lot of money when you ship it to England and other places, but good luck eating it, right? Like when you get hungry, Southern soldiers, you're going to chew on your cotton, you're going to chew on your tobacco. I mean, I guess you could chew tobacco, but you don't eat it, okay? Whereas in the North, they're growing corn, they're growing wheat, right? They got all the stuff that they have been growing. The food stuff is grown in the North. And it's not like there's nowhere in the South that they're growing food. I mean, they're still growing. There are places in the South where they grow food, but not enough. Okay. And so that's definitely an advantage for the North. Naval power. Okay. Naval power. The South does not have a Navy, right? The Union does have a Navy, okay? And so that's also a big advantage. One of the first things that's going to happen at the beginning of this war, and I think I could use this image to show you, just to give you a sense of it. The Union Navy is going to immediately, after war is inaugurated, right? Fort Sumter starts the war, and now it's on, right? The Union Navy is going to blockade the entire coastline. Okay. And that's going to make it very difficult for the South to get any kind of supply help from overseas, right? Because Union naval vessels can just intercept anything that comes in from overseas, right? Notably, the Union Navy is going to, right down in here in 1861, they're going to take New Orleans from the South. So, I guess it's kind of ironic that, one of the most southern cities in the entire United States is going to be under Union occupation for the duration of the war. Okay. Union Army will take New Orleans, the Navy will blockade it off here. And the point of that was to try and gain control of the Mississippi River so Southerners couldn't use it to move stuff. Okay. And to get stuff up in here to southern states that are further west, like Arkansas or Texas, from the eastern southern states, right? Like the idea was to kind of try and cut them in two. Okay. I'll kind of get more into that a little bit later. By the way, while I'm on this map, because I forgot to talk about it earlier, I mean, look at the railroad network. I mean, look at that. You see that by 1861 in red there, look at how much more extensive it is in the north compared to the south, right? Like that's a big difference. And when you're trying to move troops from here to here, that stuff matters. Okay, that stuff matters. Potential for allies. All right. So at the end of the day, the North really doesn't have any potential for allies. I mean, we are the United States, right? Like, what are we going to do? Get Canada on our side? Like, there is no real potential for allies for us. It's the Southerners who are going to need the allies. And that's going to be something that some Southerners are going to kind of, hope for. I'm kind of looking at this and I'm realizing I did not put anything in on the idea of Britain interfering. And so let me kind of throw you an example of potential ways that England could intervene that Abraham Lincoln is afraid of. So let me screen share. Let me news share with a whiteboard here because I didn't put it in a module. I apologize for that. Okay, so early on in the war, there was this international incident known as the Trent Affair. I want to say it was in 1861. Let me do it real quick. Not like you guys can't look it up on your own, but 1861. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. All right, so in 1861, the Trent Affair was an incident that took place off the coast. Members of the Southern Confederate States had attempted to contact England to discuss the potential of England teaming up with the Southern United States in their bid to defeat the bully of the North, right? And they met together on a trip known as a ship known as the Trent, okay? Well, this ship was boarded by a U.S. naval vessel, like a U.S. Navy patrol ship. And the people on the Trent were arrested. And that included British diplomats. So the British were talking to Southerners, right? And the justification was that these Southerners, they don't represent the United States. They represent a country that Abraham Lincoln does not recognize. Abraham Lincoln did not recognize the Confederacy as a separate country. He did not. Okay. He viewed the Confederacy as states in rebellion. And therefore, these people that were trying to talk to the British, okay, they don't represent a country. They're rebels. They're criminals. Okay. And therefore, they should be arrested. Well, England didn't see it that way. And England got pretty kind of pissed off about the Trent Affair. And they're like, yo, we decide who we want to talk to. You can't just come in and like arrest people because we're trying to meet with the South. That's got nothing to do with you. And truth be told, I personally believe Lincoln was right. However, Lincoln's famous line, I believe, was one war at a time. And he let the situation go. He did not hold on to the people that were arrested at the Trent affair. Okay. But it shows you the potential of England interfering in our Civil War. And that's going to be on Lincoln's mind a lot, and in the mind of other politicians in Washington, D.C. Like, how do we keep the British out of this thing? Because we cannot have them helping the Southern United States in the same way that France helped us against England during our revolution. That would be a disaster. Okay, so whatever it takes. So Lincoln kind of backs down on that. Another example of potential British involvement is the Confederate ship known as the Alabama. Okay, this was a ship that was built in England. It was armed with British guns, and it was given to the Southerners, and Southern sailors were the ones who manned it. Okay. And this ship was a blockade runner, meaning its job was to sink Union vessels that were enclosing off the United States, or closing off the southern states, right, off the coast, like I just showed you. This ship's job was to sink Union vessels that were trying to do that. And it was pretty good at it. It was a well-built ship. It sank a lot of Union vessels before it was finally tracked down, and itself was sunk in, I think it was 1864, right? But again, look at what's happening. This is a ship built and armed by Britain for Southerners to use. So the potential of Britain's involvement in the United States Civil War was very real. And Lincoln was aware of it, and the military in the North was aware of it, and people were worried about it. England even sent advisors to observe the situation as some of these battles played out. Ultimately, of course, England will not get involved on the South's behalf, but it was close enough that it made people nervous. Okay, so understand that the threat of England intervening is always there. And I will mention that again when I talk about the Emancipation Proclamation later. So let me, hold on a minute. Sorry, I've never been good at switching over the share in this thing. Okay, economy and currency. Well, right. So here's the thing, right? Advantage North, correct? Because we've got this economy built on capitalism and production, industrialization, manufacturing. We can make whatever we want, okay? Everything from food to canned goods to, uniforms, whatever. Like, and also our money is recognized around the world, right? Like United States money is an international unit. Like people will take it, right? And so if we want to be lent money, or not, well, lend money, but also if, we could buy goods from another nation if we needed to and pay later, we could get the credit. You can't say that about the Southern Confederacy. The Southern Confederacy is brand new. They're claiming to be a country, but our president of the United States is saying that they're not, right? And so the international community doesn't really know what to make of this new Confederate states, right? So how can you trust their currency? It's not, it's not really, it's not even close, right, to be honest. Population differences, okay? Overwhelmingly advantage the North. Okay. I think the population advantage was something like 5 or 6 to 1 in terms of fighting men that could be thrown into this conflict, because where do all the white people live? Where are all the white people at? Where do they live? Up here in the North. Okay. In the South, remember, there's a couple million enslaved Black people there, right? And Southerners aren't going to arm them. They're not. So if you take out a couple of million Black Americans who are not going to be allowed to fight in this conflict, then the people that are left are the whites trying to fight the North, and they're just completely outnumbered. Like it's not even close. And that's why one of the strategies of this conflict is going to be to use the numerical advantage. You want to like, rule of thumb is when you attack somebody, and I get this, I'm starting to get technical with military stuff, but hey, that's who I am. Rule of thumb is when you attack somebody, you want a 5-to-1 advantage in person, in people. Okay. Because attacking is harder than defending. You're going to take more casualties when you attack because it's harder to take something from somebody than it is for them to hold on to what they already have. And since the Union or the North is going to be on the offensive in this war, because they have to invade the South to like stamp out secession and force Southerners back into the Union, they need the population advantage, but at least the North has that population advantage, and it's a pretty good one. Okay, it's a pretty big one. And then, of course, at the beginning of the war, the cause, that is advantage Southerners. And I know what some of you guys are thinking, like, wait, Moretti, wait. How can the cause be on the side of the South? Aren't they defending slavery? Now wait, grasshoppers, negatory, just stop. Here's the deal, right? When this war begins, Lincoln is not making war on slavery. Okay, very important. Circle it in blood. When this war begins, Abraham Lincoln is waging war on secession, right? He denies the right of any state to leave the Union. And when they do, he's making war on secessionists, the people that would break away. Lincoln does not make this a war on slavery initially, okay? It becomes a war against slavery later with the Emancipation Proclamation, but that doesn't happen until 1862. At the beginning, this is a war against secession. And the reason for that, of course, is that there are some border states here, like Missouri and Kentucky, okay? Maryland. It's hard to see Maryland on this map, okay? Up here, sorry. These are considered border states, okay? Some people in those states are anti-slavery. Some people in those states are pro-slavery. They're technically slave states because slavery is, allowed there when the war starts, but their populations are divided on the issue, right? And one of the things that Lincoln's going to do early in the war is he's going to occupy the border states as best as he can, okay? There's a famous quote that supposedly is attributed to Lincoln. It's probably not true, but I love it anyway, where he supposedly said, I would like to have God on my side, but I must have Kentucky, okay? And the quote, whether it's true or not, illustrates the importance of these border states in the mind of Lincoln. I cannot allow Missouri, Kentucky, and Maryland to join the Confederacy. I just can't do it, right? And so therefore, he's going to occupy these states the extent to which is possible to prevent them from leaving the Union, okay? So the war, though, is against secession, these states down here, not slavery at first. Meanwhile, in the South, the war is about freedom, right? It's about preserving our Southern rights against the bullies of the North, right? And let's be honest, what's really a more motivating cause? Believing that you're fighting for your rights, or, hey guys, we're going to make a war on secession? Like, which one of those two is more motivating? So Southerners believe they have this cause, they're fighting for this cause, they're all in on this cause. They believe that they are separating from the United States in the same way that the United States had previously separated from England, right? So Southerners are claiming the social contract, right? We are being denied life, liberty, and property, most notably property because of our slaves, and therefore they have the cause early in the war. That will change after the Battle of Antietam, which is a story for another day. All right, Shady Lincoln. So I already started hinting at some of this stuff. And so, there's the popular kind of trope on Abraham Lincoln is that, honest Abe, right? Like honest Abe Lincoln. Even, most Lincoln reenactors would probably play him that way. And I kind of told you guys this before. No. More like shady Lincoln. Okay. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Yeah. Look at him. Badass, right? You can feel the ready man crush on Lincoln. Okay. Like, look at this guy, penetrating eyes. Right. A shady Lincoln. I always throw in here to remind you that Abraham Lincoln did some stuff, I'll be honest with you, which was straight up unconstitutional, okay, in fighting the Civil War, like in fighting the South. I believe the quote was something along the lines of, and I don't remember where I read this. It might have been in one of our previous textbooks, but in order to save the Constitution, you needed to tear it up first. Okay. And like that's effectively what Lincoln is doing with some of these things. And then some of the stuff he's doing is a gray area, like, is it constitutional or not? But like a lot of what he does is like straight up unconstitutional. Okay. So I already told you about the challenges presented by the border states, because there are a lot of like pro-slavery, pro-secession people that live in those border states. And that is why Lincoln's going to institute martial law there. Okay. He's going to literally invade, like Maryland's a great example. Maryland's the best example of this, where the Union Army goes into Maryland, goes into Baltimore to occupy it and make sure that the legislature in Maryland there does not vote for secession. And street fighting breaks out. I mean, there are actual shots fired in the pacification of Maryland, but it's martial law. Like the United States, you're really not allowed to declare martial law as commander. Now he's going to like claim that this is within his rights as commander in chief of the U.S. military, but he's going to occupy these border states like Maryland as commander in chief. Okay. Voter suppression. Okay. Supervised voting. So you're going to have troops in these border states. And when it comes time to vote on things like secession or whatever, if the state legislature is going to vote, you have to cast your votes with Union troops standing there right there with guns. Okay. And they can push away whoever they need to push away to make sure their vote doesn't get in. Right. That's how much Lincoln wants these border states to stay in the Union. All right. It really is a big deal. Habeas corpus. So before you can throw somebody in jail, you're supposed to have just cause, right? Habeas corpus means that you have to have some kind of body of evidence that tells you that you're allowed to arrest somebody. Like you have to have a reason, right? For throwing somebody in jail. And you have to be able to present evidence of why you're doing it. Okay. Or tell them why they're being arrested as well. In the case of Lincoln, not gonna. He's just gonna like arrest people that he suspects of being secessionists or pushing secession in the border states. And he's gonna throw them in jail. He's just gonna hold them there, all right, indefinitely. Okay. I mean, that's illegal. You're not supposed to be able to do that. And again, all of this is going to be justified under his executive powers as commander in chief. Like these are all wartime necessities. It won't be the last time that a commander in chief of this nation as president of the United States is going to do some shady stuff in the name of like military necessity. And Lincoln is no different. Okay. And of course, waging an undeclared war. Remember, grasshoppers, when this war begins, half of Congress leaves, right? Like if you're a Southern senator, are you going to stay in Congress or are you going to head south and join their Congress, right? And that's what happens. Like half of Congress leaves. And the only ones that stay are Southerners that are opposed to secession. And those do exist. Those do exist, okay? And they are in Congress. But a large percentage of Congress leaves, right? And therefore, waging war is kind of a foregone conclusion. Like, how can Congress vote on whether it should fight a war or not when half of it's gone? All right. So technically, the entire Civil War, Lincoln is waging war without getting a declaration of it from Congress. Okay. I know it's a unique situation. Obviously, the people that wrote the Constitution didn't anticipate this, but it's on us. And Lincoln is just like, you know, and again, he doesn't view it as he's fighting another country anyway, because he doesn't accept the premise that the Confederates are a foreign country, right? The Confederates are Americans in a state of rebellion. So this is more of a police action more than it is a declaration of war in his eyes, okay? I mean, it's a hell of a police action, but you guys get the idea. All right, and that brings us to the last part of this, which this is the last part, all right, is strategies, okay? So what are these strategies for fighting this conflict? Like, how is this going to play out? And like, there are two distinct strategies, right? Let's start with Southerners. Like Southern strategy is actually real simple, okay? Hit and run, guerrilla war. Like if you read as much about the Civil War as I have, which, I don't necessarily recommend, a lot of these generals talk about it all the time. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, James Longstreet. These guys are often talking about how, like, we want to fight on ground of our choosing. So we want to, run, and then make a stand on ground that we choose. So we're going to make the Union Army attack us on ground that we've chosen because we've decided we're going to dig in here, or we're going to use the geography to our advantage, because Southerners know they're on the defense, right? Southerners are on the defense. The Northerners got to come get us. And so that partially explains why a lot of these early battles go against the North. Okay. The fact that Southerners are going to choose the ground that they want to fight on, combined with the fact that, the leadership in the North is so bad that a lot of these battles early on are going to go against the North, and it's going to drive Lincoln absolutely crazy. But like, it's an easy strategy: hit and run till you find where you want to make your stand, and then make a stand and then retreat again. For the Southern Army, it's all about keeping the army alive. It's the same strategy that we use in the American Revolution against Britain. Keep the army alive, drag the conflict out as long as possible, and eventually Northerners are going to give up. They just don't want to. They're not going to want to keep fighting after a certain amount of time. Southerners aren't stupid. I mean, they know that people in the North are divided about this conflict. There are many, many people that live in the North who feel like, why are we forcing Southerners to stay? If they want a divorce, grant them a divorce. Like, what are we doing here? Okay. And therefore, the South strategy is to drag out the war long enough until more and more people in the North feel that way, right? It's not worth it. Let them go. So then what is the Union strategy, right? So how is the North going to attempt to win this conflict, right? And for that, I'm going to clear this. It'll be something referred to as the Anaconda Plan. Okay. And if any of you know anything about the anaconda, it's a snake, right? And what does it do? It's one of those big stinking snakes that like squeezes you until you die, right? It crushes you. And the idea is to squeeze the South, right? So for first part of the Anaconda Plan, right, is you're going to have to take out the heart of the South, which is the capital at Richmond. Target and conquer Richmond. Richmond is where the Confederates set up their capital. Okay, so on to Richmond, right, is a thing like that. That's the idea. Take out their capital. I think it's somewhat ironic, right, grasshoppers, that it's in Virginia and Richmond is only like a maybe 4-hour car drive or so from Washington, D.C. They're really not that far apart from each other. You're like, really, Southerners? Like, you couldn't, chosen like Tampa, Florida or something, like something that's further away. Nope, they chose Richmond. And so, the Northerners like, All right, well, let's mass our troops in, in Washington, D.C. and march to Richmond. That's going to be a thing. Target Richmond. Okay. And of course, blockade the coast, which I, already kind of explained it to you, blockade the coast. Don't allow the southern states to have any foreign aid at all. Okay. Blockade the coast. Right. Then control the, let's see, Mississippi. All right, control the Mississippi River. Okay. And the idea is to, that's where I was talking to you guys before about like capturing New Orleans. The idea is if you capture New Orleans there, and then eventually you can control the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River, if the Union Army controls it, will divide the South in half. All right. It'll keep states like Texas, which is a big source of Southern manpower and economic stability. It keeps state like Texas separated from the rest of the Confederacy. Okay. And if the Union Army controls the Mississippi River, then Southerners can't float supplies up and down that river, right, without the Union being able to confiscate those supplies. Right now, in order to control the Mississippi River, of course, I'll be coming back to this later, Northerners are going to have to control Vicksburg, the river city of Vicksburg, which is in Mississippi. Okay. That will explain what happens later when I get to it, but that's a big part of this. Control the Mississippi River. Plunge into and divide the South. Okay. And the idea is use the border states as a launching point. Okay. Even a state like Illinois, which I've been telling you guys all along, is kind of divided a little bit on this. Cairo, Illinois, which is like the furthest south town in Illinois, becomes the launching point for invasions into like Tennessee and places like that. All right. But also other border states like Kentucky, you can mass troops there and then plunge into the South and divide it. The idea really is to plunge into the Carolinas and Georgia and further divide the South in order to conquer it. Okay. Grind it out. For the Union Army, we have a manpower advantage. It's like whatever it is, 5 or 6 to 1. Okay. Send them in, right? Like, don't worry about casualties. Like, line your guys up, send them in there until the Southerners run out of bullets, right? Use your manpower advantage. The problem is, if you think about that, that is a politically unacceptable military position to take, right? Because how do you tell the wives or sisters or, brothers of guys who died in some of these battles? Well, we needed to just send your dad in because we had more guys than they did. And like, he soaked up the bullets so that the rest of the guys could, overwhelm, the Confederates. That's tough. It's a tough sell. And a lot of commanders in the North, part of the reason why Lincoln has a hard time finding commanders that want to do is because he can't find guys who want to do this. He cannot find commanders willing to sacrifice their men to the extent to which you need to do so if you want to successfully attack somebody. Okay. They just don't want to do it. And when the casualty numbers come in a lot of these battles and these commanders have to read the names in the casualty reports, it spooks them. It freaks them out until we get to Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman. Those are the only 2 guys right from the beginning who kind of understand what this is going to take. Everybody else is like, when it comes to this part of the strategy. And then of course, deprive the South of its labor source. Eventually, the strategy, of course, becomes as enslaved people inevitably leave their plantations during the fighting. Okay. Don't send them back. Hold on to them, because if you take away the people who are enslaved, now who's going to produce stuff for Southerners? Okay. And so, like, you look at this plan, do you notice how much more complicated it is? Let me go back to this again real quick. Do you notice how much more complicated that plan is than what the Southerners need to do? See what I'm saying? And that's why, you know, there are so many losses by the Union Army early in this conflict. 1861 through 1863 is a nightmare for Abraham Lincoln, because it's just like loss after loss after loss in major battles out here in Virginia, because he can't find commanders who are going to be competent or willing to execute the strategy, right? And this is a good visual of it. If you blockade the coast and then you take control of the Mississippi River, you've effectively surrounded this part of the South so you can squeeze it, and you've separated states like Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas from being able to help. Okay. And so that's basically what the Anaconda plan was for us. Southerners, they want to wait it out in the war of attrition and string this sucker out. Northerners, they want to get it over with, and so they're going to have to employ these strategies. And like I said, though, the problem is that there aren't a lot of commanders that are willing to do this in the North, or are competent enough to do this. So that gives you a sense of all these early problems and what the strategies were and everything else. Okay, so I think the next time I see you guys, the video will be about Civil War technology and the Battle of Shiloh. So, you know, tune in tomorrow, I guess. See y'all.